decided her pigtails were provocative? Who looked at playground knees and called them invitation? Who taught the world to translate black girl into grown woman in training before she even learned long division? You tell me, how does a child become suspicious just for surviving in skin that history already criminalized? Because research says they start at 5. 5. Before she even knows the weight of her own name, adults already believe she needs less protection, less comfort, less nurturing, less childhood. 5 years old and already misread like a warning label. They say she's fast. But fast is what you call a lie when you need to outrun accountability. Fast is what you call a body you refuse to see as a child. Fast is what predators whisper to make permission out of puberty. Because when her hips bloom early, they don't call it biology. They call it access. They don't say she's developing, they say she's asking. And this is not new. This is inherited. This is stitched into the same history that auctioned black girls on wooden stages where innocence was never currency, where their bodies were both labor and liability, where childhood was not a right, it was a privilege denied, adultification. A clinical word for a cultural crime, a phenomenon where black girls are seen as older, less innocent, more sexual, more responsible, more blameworthy. But let's call it what it is. A theft. Because when a black girl cries, they don't hear distress, they hear attitude. When she defends herself, they don't see fear, they see aggression. In schools, she is punished 3 to 5 times more than her white peers, not because she misbehaves more, but because she is perceived as more dangerous. She is disciplined for surviving, criminalized for coping, erased for existing, and then we arrive here. Headlines, whispers, debates disguised as concern, a grown man, a young girl, and somehow the conversation bends towards her body, her maturity, her energy, her knowing better, as if childhood has prerequisites, as if innocence must be proven, as if black girls must audition for protection. 16 is not a suggestion, not a gray area, not a she knew better clause hidden in fine print. 16 is still asking permission to use the bathroom, still learning the difference between attention and affection, still believing grown means safe. But somehow, when the girl is black, 16 becomes negotiable. He was 22, a number old enough to know better, old enough to be better, old enough to recognize that power is not something you place your hands on and call love. But instead, he called it mutual, he called it normal, he called it nothing. And in doing so, he called her childhood disposable. Brandy Norwood wrote about shame like it was something she had to carry alone. Embarrassment like it belonged to her body instead of his decisions. Realization like waking up in a house you didn't know was burning until the smoke already lived in your lungs. Because that's what happens when a child is taught to process adult harm with child-sized understanding. And Wanye Morris stood in the light of hindsight and still chose shadow, still chose dismissal, still chose to shrink 16 into something convenient, and still chose to say she was grown enough. Let's be clear. There is no version of 16 that outruns 22, no version of adolescence that equals adulthood, no version of her body that rewrites the law of her age, because what he minimized is what so many black girls live. The burden of being seen as older than they are, stronger than they should have to be, knowing more than they were ever meant to carry. And back then, we didn't have the words. No power imbalance, no grooming, no viral think pieces breaking down the anatomy of harm, just silence dressed up as normal, just secrets signed into contracts, just a culture that knew something felt off but didn't know how to say wrong out loud. Because the 90s didn't lack understanding, it lacked accountability. She was 16, and not just any 16, she was Brandy. America's girl, braids beaded with innocence, a voice so pure it made the world believe in soft things again. She wasn't just a child, she was a brand. And brands don't get protected, they get preserved, maintained, managed, monetized. So when harm entered the room, it didn't get confronted, it got negotiated, because protecting her meant risking profit. And in an industry where image is currency, her safety became expendable. And that's the part we don't say enough. Black girls don't just get unprotected, they get sacrificed. On the altar of optics, on the stage of don't mess this up, on the quiet agreement that says, let's not ruin what this could become. She did not need words to know she was unprotected. She just needed someone to prove she was worth protecting. So I'm asking, no, I'm demanding. When will the world stop confusing survival with seduction? When will we stop dressing predators in excuses and stripping children of their truth? Every time you call her fast, you slow down accountability. Every time you call her grown, you shrink her protection. Every time you question her innocence, you participate in its destruction. She was not fast, she was not grown, she was 16. Silence was never innocent, it was strategy. Protection was never missing, it was misplaced. And the system didn't fail her. Unfortunately, it functioned exactly how it was designed to protect profit, to protect men, to protect image, but never the black girl. You said back then we didn't have the language, but she had the feeling that something wasn't right, that something didn't sit clean in her spirit, that something took from her before she even knew how to name what was taken. And maybe that's the most devastating truth of all. She didn't need the words to know she was unprotected. She just needed someone to prove she was worth protecting. 16 is not a suggestion. 16 is not a loophole. 16 is a child. And the problem was never her age looking older. It was an adult choosing to ignore it.